The storm came fast, faster than anyone expected. Dark clouds rolled over the wide Texas plains like giant black waves, and the wind pushed the tall wheat until it bent almost flat. Cowboys on the ranch yelled to each other, trying to save the harvest before the rain ruined everything. Wheat meant food. Wheat meant money. And this year, every farm in the area was already short on workers because so many men were off fighting in the war. Tractors growled across the fields, wagons bounced in the dirt, horses kicked nervously as thunder cracked across the sky. Everyone knew they were running out of time. Then one of the tractors broke down with a loud metal snap. A second tractor got stuck in the mud. A third horse panicked and tried to run off the road. The cowboys cursed and tried to pull everything together, but nothing worked. The storm got louder. The sky got darker. And every minute that passed meant more wheat lost forever. "Hold the line!" one cowboy shouted, but his voice was shaking. "We're not gonna make it!" another yelled back. Just then, something strange happened. A German POW, a prisoner of war from the enemy side, jumped down from the back of a wagon. His name wasn't known to most of the cowboys. To them, he was just the German. A man they were told not to trust. A man who wore old work boots, simple clothes, and a small white armband that marked him as a prisoner. He was never supposed to step forward. He was supposed to stay back, stay quiet, and follow orders. But he didn't. When the horse reared up and swung wildly in the wind, the cowboys stepped away. They didn't want to get kicked. They didn't want to get hurt. The animal was too scared, too strong, and too close to breaking free. But the German POW walked right toward it. He didn't shout. He didn't panic. He reached out slowly, placing one hand on the horse's neck, whispering something no one could hear. The horse stopped shaking. It stopped pulling. It lowered its head like it trusted him instantly. The cowboys stared in shock. Then he grabbed the reins, lifted them gently, and guided the horse back into position. Mud splashed around his legs. Wind whipped his clothes. But his face stayed calm, like he had done this 1,000 times before. One cowboy whispered, How did he do that?" Another said, "Is he crazy?" A third muttered, "He's supposed to be the enemy." But in that moment, none of that mattered, because the German POW had just saved the last horse strong enough to pull the heavy wagon. Without that horse, the harvest would be lost, and without the harvest, 2 whole states would run short on grain. Thunder cracked again, the fields shook, everyone braced themselves, but now, for the first time all day, they had a chance. And it was all because of the man no one expected to help. The man who wasn't supposed to save anything at all. Before he ever stepped on American soil, before he touched a horse in Texas, the German POW had been someone very different. His name was Carl Ritter. He was 23 years old and came from a small village in Bavaria, a quiet part of Germany filled with green hills, cows, and simple farmhouses. He grew up waking to the sound of roosters, helping his father feed animals, and spending long days in the fields. He was not a soldier at heart. He was a farm kid, gentle, hard-working, and used to the slow rhythm of country life. But when the war began, everything changed. Germany needed soldiers, and Carl was taken from his home. One morning he packed a small bag, hugged his mother goodbye, and walked down the dirt road to join the army. His mother cried. His father didn't speak. Carl did not want to go, but he had no choice. He was not angry, not proud, just scared and unsure. War was nothing like home. He marched across foreign lands, slept in cold tents, and faced battles he never wanted to be part of. His unit fought in North Africa, where the sun burned like fire. Sandstorms blinded their eyes. Food was low. Water was lower. Carl spent more time hoping to survive than thinking about winning. One morning, after a long fight, his unit was surrounded. American soldiers captured them. Carl did not run. He did not fight back. He dropped his rifle and raised his hands. He was tired of war. After that, Carl and hundreds of other German prisoners were put on a ship. The journey across the ocean was long and rough. Waves hit the sides of the ship like angry fists. Some men were sick. Others cried quietly at night. Carl stared at the sea, wondering if he would ever see home again. Weeks later, the ship reached America. When Carl first stepped off the train in Texas, he could not believe what he saw. The land stretched like forever. The sky was wide, wider than anything he had ever seen. Instead of ruined towns and burned fields, there were open plains, strong horses, big barns, and cowboys riding as if they belonged to the wind. American guards watched the POWs closely, but they were not cruel. They gave the men clean clothes, safe sleeping quarters, and food that tasted better than anything Carl had eaten during the war. Many POWs whispered to each other, confused. Why are they treating us this well? We are the enemy. Carl didn't know the answer, but he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Soon he and other POWs were assigned to local farms to help with work. America needed workers. The war had taken many young men away, and the fields were empty. That is how Carl ended up at McGraw Ranch, where the dry earth, the wheat fields, and the strong smell of horses reminded him of home. And that is where he first saw Tom McGraw, the cowboy who would one day become his best friend. Even though they were supposed to stand on opposite sides of the world. Tom McGraw was not an easy man to impress. He had lived his whole life on the Texas plains, riding horses before he could walk, roping cattle before he could write his own name. His hands were rough like old leather, and his face looked as if the sun had carved lines into it one long day at a time. He worked hard, spoke little, and trusted almost no one, especially not a German prisoner of war. The first day Carl arrived at the McGraw Ranch, Tom watched him from a distance. Carl was thin, quiet, and looked tired in a way that went deeper than his bones. He didn't complain. He didn't ask for help. He simply stood where the guards told him to stand, eyes low, waiting for orders. To Tom, he looked like trouble, or at least a bad idea. "We're really using POWs now?" Tom muttered to another cowboy. "Yep," the cowboy said. "Army says we need 'em for the harvest." Tom shook his head. "I don't like strangers near my tools." But his ranch didn't have enough hands, and the wheat fields didn't care about trust. They needed workers. That morning, Tom pointed Carl toward an old wooden fence that had been broken for months. "Fix it," he said. He didn't expect much, maybe a sloppy job. Maybe Carl would pretend not to understand English. What happened next made Tom stop in his tracks. Carl walked over, studied the fence carefully, then got to work with surprising skill. He lifted the broken plank, measured the old nails, and hammered in a new board with steady, strong swings. He didn't rush. He didn't pause. In less than 10 minutes, the fence looked better than it had in years. Tom blinked. No farmhand he'd hired had ever fixed something that fast. Later that day, Tom watched Carl again. Carl carried heavy buckets without spilling a drop. He calmed a jumpy horse by simply placing a hand on its neck. He stacked hay bales twice as high as most workers could manage. The cowboys whispered among themselves, "That German is stronger than he looks. He works like he's been doing this forever. Does he even get tired?" But not everyone was happy. Some locals frowned when they saw Carl in the field. "That's a Nazi," one man said sharply. "You shouldn't trust him," another warned. "He's only pretending to be helpful." Tom didn't answer. He just kept watching. By the end of the first week, Tom noticed something strange. Whenever Carl worked nearby, things simply went smoother. Fences held, horses behaved, tools got fixed, and jobs took half the time. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the hills, Tom walked over to Carl. "You ever work a ranch before?" Tom asked. Carl nodded softly. "I grew up on a farm," he said. Tom studied him for a long moment. Then he gave a small, quiet nod, the closest thing to a compliment he gave anyone. From that day forward, Tom McGraw didn't see Carl only as a prisoner. He saw him as a worker, a helper, maybe even something more. Someone who could be trusted, someone worth giving a chance, someone who might just save the ranch, even if no one else believed it yet. As the days passed, Tom McGraw noticed something new about Carl, something he had not seen in any worker before. The German POW didn't just work hard, he worked smart. He watched every tool, every animal, and every machine the way a doctor studies a patient. He noticed small things most people ignored. He paid attention to the land like it was speaking to him, and soon everyone else started noticing too. One hot afternoon, the ranch's old combine suddenly clattered and shut down right in the middle of the wheat field. The machine was important. Without it, the harvest would slow to a crawl. Cowboys gathered around it, wiping sweat from their foreheads, shaking their heads. "It's done," one cowboy said. "We need a new part," another added. Tom sighed. "That'll take days." Carl stepped forward quietly. "May I look?" he asked. The cowboys exchanged glances. "What does he know?" one muttered. "He's just a POW," another said. But Tom nodded for Carl to try. Carl knelt beside the machine like he had known it all his life. He tapped the metal gently. He checked the belts, the gears, the bolts. Then he pointed to a small part hidden under the engine. "This piece," he said. "It is loose." Tom crouched next to him. "You think that's it?" Carl nodded. "On my father's farm, we fixed machines like this. The heat makes the bolts shake free." With simple tools, Carl tightened the piece, adjusted the belt, and wiped the dust away. "Try it now," he said. Tom climbed up, turned the key, and the engine roared back to life like a hungry beast waking up. The cowboy's jaws dropped. "How did he do that?" "That should have taken a mechanic." "He fixed it in 5 minutes." Carl just smiled shyly and wiped his hands on his pants. "I learned from my father," he said softly. But that was only the beginning. A few days later, a young horse bucked wildly during training. 3 cowboys couldn't calm it down. It kicked so hard that one man almost fell over. The horse snorted, stomped, and pulled at the rope like it wanted to escape forever. Carl stepped up slowly. He didn't shout. He didn't grab hard. He simply placed his hand on the horse's neck, the same way he had done during the storm. The horse stopped, breathed, lowered its head. The cowboys stared in silence. Tom folded his arms and whispered, almost to himself, "Boys got hands of magic." Word began to spread from ranch to ranch. "The German fixes machines like a wizard." "He can calm any horse." "He knows the land like he was born here." People came to watch him work. Farmers asked Tom if they could borrow Carl for a day or two. Even other POWs noticed Carl's skill and followed his lead in the fields. Tom saw clearly what others were just discovering. Carl wasn't just a helper. He was changing the ranch, saving time, saving money, saving crops. And he didn't even realize how important his work was. But soon everyone, from small farmers to state officials, would know exactly how much this quiet German POW could do. Because the biggest test of all was still coming, and it would take more than skill to survive it. By late summer, the Texas sun felt hotter than ever. The wheat in the field stood tall and golden, ready to be picked. But the ranchers were worried, very worried. 2 states, Texas and Oklahoma, were facing the same problem. Not enough workers. Most young American men were far away, fighting in Europe or the Pacific. The farms had only old men, women, teenagers, and a few cowboys left to do the work. And now, the harvest was bigger than anyone expected. "This year's crop is huge," one farmer said, "but we don't have the hands to bring it in," another added. Then the worst news came. A giant storm system was building, the kind of storm that could destroy entire wheat fields in one long night. If the harvest wasn't completed soon, millions of bushels of wheat would rot in the mud. 2 states would lose their food supply, farmers would lose their income, and the war effort, which depended on American wheat to feed soldiers, would suffer too. The pressure was crushing. Tom McGraw stood on the porch of his ranch house, staring at the growing clouds. "This is bad," he muttered. "Real bad." Cowboys paced nervously. Parents prayed. Farmers looked at their fields with fear in their eyes. Then someone said, "What about the POWs? They can work?" And someone else snapped back, "They're prisoners, not heroes." But deep down, everyone knew the truth. Without every single worker, American or POW, the harvest would be lost. The next morning, the ranchers called a meeting. Carl stood quietly at the back with the other German POWs. He listened as Tom explained the situation. "We need everyone," Tom said. "Every tractor, every wagon, every horse. If we don't get these fields cleared before the storm hits, we're done." A farmer threw his hat on the ground. "We can't do it," he said. "We're outnumbered, outmanned, out of time." Carl stepped forward slowly. "Maybe," he said, choosing his English words carefully, "maybe we can do it another way." The whole room turned toward him. Carl took a breath. "In Germany, our farms work together. Many families harvest as one team. We call it a cooperative. We move from field to field, fast, organized. We share tools and people." The ranchers stared at him like he had just spoken from another world. "You're saying," Tom asked, "that we join all the ranches together?" Carl nodded. "Yes, Work as one. It is faster." A few cowboys scoffed. "A German telling us how to farm? You're out of your mind." But Tom didn't laugh. He looked at Carl, really looked at him. This POW had fixed machines, saved horses, and worked harder than anyone. Maybe, just maybe, he was right. Tom stepped forward. "Let him speak," he said. "Let's hear the plan." Carl explained how to divide the teams, where to place horses, how to move tractors in line so no time was wasted. He drew simple maps in the dirt with a stick. He spoke with the calm confidence of someone who had lived his whole life on farmland. When he finished, the ranchers stood in silence. Finally, Tom said, "It's risky, it's crazy, but it's the only chance we've got." And so, on that day, in a dusty barn, lit by one flickering bulb, a German prisoner of war became the leader of the biggest harvest operation the ranchers had ever attempted. The storm was coming. The fields were waiting. And Carl's plan was about to be tested in the fight of its life. The next morning, before the sun even rose, the ranch was already buzzing with noise. Horses stomped in the dirt. Tractors coughed to life. Cowboys hurried from one wagon to another. Everyone felt the same thing deep in their stomachs. Fear and hope mixed together. The storm was getting closer. Dark clouds stretched across the sky like a giant shadow creeping toward them. This was the day everything had to work, and all eyes were on one person, Carl. He stood in the middle of the field with a map in his hands, the same dirt-covered map he had drawn the night before. His voice was calm, even though his heart was pounding. He pointed to the teams he had organized. One group would cut the wheat, one would gather it, one would load it onto wagons, another group would drive it to storage barns. Every person had a job, every horse had a place, every tractor had a route. "Move fast," Carl said, "but stay steady. No stopping." Tom rode up beside him on his horse. "You sure about this?" he asked. Carl nodded. "It will work." The first hour went well. The teams moved like a living machine. Wheat fell in clean golden waves as the combines rolled forward. Workers gathered it and loaded it into wagons. Horses trotted in neat lines. For the first time all week, the ranchers thought, maybe we can do this. But then the wind changed. A hard gust swept across the fields, blowing dust into everyone's eyes. One of the tractors sputtered and lurched to a stop. A wagon's wheel slipped deep into mud. A horse panicked and tried to run again. The ranchers froze. This was how things usually fell apart. Before anyone could panic, Carl sprinted toward the stuck tractor. He slid under the engine, fixed a loose belt with his bare hands, and shouted, "Start it now!" The driver turned the key. The engine roared back to life. Carl ran to the wagon next. He grabbed a long wooden plank, jammed it under the wheel, and yelled for two cowboys to push. With one hard shove, the wagon broke free. The cowboys stared at him like he was some kind of miracle worker. Then the horse began kicking. Cowboys backed away, nervous to get near its hooves. Carl stepped in without fear. He placed both hands on the horse's neck and whispered something quietly. The horse calmed again, just like before. No one understood how he did it. They only knew he could. Word spread fast. "Follow Carl!" people yelled across the fields. "Do what he says!" Soon everyone moved with new energy. They trusted him now. Even the American guards, who normally kept their distance, joined the work line. Tom rode back and forth, helping wherever he was needed. Hours passed. Sweat dripped. Muscles ached. The storm clouds grew bigger, darker, meaner. But the fields grew emptier. Wagon by wagon, more and more wheat made it safely into the barns. By the time the first raindrops fell, the last wagon rolled into shelter. The fields were saved. The harvest was saved. 2 whole states were saved. And when the lightning flashed across the sky, the cowboys saw something they never expected to see. Carl, standing in the middle of the field, soaked from the rain, breathing hard but smiling. Because his plan had worked. Because he had helped strangers who were supposed to be his enemies. Tom walked up to him, took off his own cowboy hat, and placed it gently on Carl's head. "Good job, partner," he said. And for the first time in America, Carl felt like he belonged. The storm passed during the night, leaving the land soaked and shining under the morning sun. The wheat barns were full, the fields were safe, and everyone knew exactly who had helped make it happen. Word spread from ranch to ranch, from small towns to big farms, and soon people everywhere were talking about the quiet German POW who had saved the harvest when no one else knew what to do. Farmers who had once frowned at Carl now tipped their hats when they saw him. Cowboys who ignored him before now slapped him on the back and said, "Good work, buddy." Even families in town whispered about him at the grocery store and the feed shop. "That German boy," they said, "he saved us from losing everything." Reports were sent to the state offices. They explained how the POW labor crews, led by Carl's idea, had kept the wheat harvest moving when manpower was low. Numbers showed that millions of dollars worth of crops had been saved. Some officials didn't believe it at first. "A prisoner?" they said. "A prisoner planned all that?" But it was true. Even the military officers at the POW camp noticed. They marked Carl's name in their logs. "Shows leadership," one wrote. "High work performance," another added. The guards, who once kept their eyes sharp on the POWs, now nodded at Carl with quiet respect when he walked by. At the McGraw Ranch, life changed too. Carl became part of the daily rhythm. He worked beside Tom, repaired machines before they broke, and trained the younger cowboys on how to handle horses and tools safely. He never bragged, never asked for special treatment, and never acted like a hero. He just kept working steady and calm, like always. Sometimes in the evenings, Carl and Tom sat together on the fence, looking at the fields as the sky turned orange and purple. They didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. The silence between them felt strong, like a kind of friendship only built through hard work and tough days. Tom trusted him completely now. Something he never expected would happen with a German POW. But time didn't stand still. The war moved closer to its end. More towns were freed in Europe. More soldiers returned home. And everyone knew that one day the POWs would have to go back too. When the news finally came, it hit Tom harder than he wanted to admit. Carl was going to be sent back to Germany. The ranch hands gathered around him, thanking him, shaking his hand, some trying not to cry. People who once feared him now looked sad to see him go. On the morning of his departure, Tom walked Carl to the truck that would take him away. For a moment, both men just stood there, staring at each other. No one spoke. Then Tom reached into his coat and pulled out something small. a smooth wooden carving shaped like a horse. "Made it myself," Tom said. "Figured you ought to have it." Carl looked at it with surprise, then with deep gratitude. He closed his hand around it gently. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything." Tom nodded, fighting back tears. "You saved more lives here than you'll ever know." Carl climbed into the truck. As it drove away, he looked back at the ranch, the fields, the barns, the horses, and the cowboy who had once doubted him but ended up becoming his best friend. The dust settled behind the truck, and Tom watched until it disappeared from sight. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just stood there, knowing that nothing about this place, or about himself, would ever be the same again. Years passed, and the fields of Texas kept growing and changing, but Tom never forgot the young German POW who had saved his harvest. Life returned to normal after the war. Soldiers came home, ranches filled with workers again. The POW camps closed, and the prisoners returned to their own countries. But Tom often found himself looking at the land and remembering the man who had once stood beside him in the storm, guiding horses and men like he had been born for it. One quiet afternoon, long after the war had ended, Tom opened his mailbox and found a letter with strange foreign stamps on it. The handwriting looked careful and familiar. When he opened it, a small smile spread across his face. The letter was from Carl. Carl wrote about his journey back to Germany. His village had been damaged by the war, houses broken, barns empty, and fields overgrown. But he had not given up. He told Tom how he rebuilt his family's farm board by board, using every skill he had learned in Texas. He fixed tractors the same way he had fixed the McGraw Ranch machines. He trained horses the way Tom had shown him. He organized his neighbors the way he had once organized the harvest crews across 2 states. And then, near the end of the letter, Carl wrote something that made Tom pause. "I named one part of my land McGraw Field," he wrote, "so I will always remember the place where I learned what true friendship means." Tom sat back and folded the letter gently, his chest feeling warm and tight at the same time. He had never asked Carl for anything. He never expected thanks. But this was something deeper, a piece of Texas living forever on the other side of the world. The years continued to roll by. Machines grew bigger, horses grew older, cowboys grew wiser. But whenever Tom visited the old wheat barns, he would notice something carved into the wooden beam near the entrance, a small outline of a horse. It was the same shape he had carved for Carl before he left. Tom had made dozens of carvings in his life, but that one was the only one he ever gave to someone he called a true friend. Sometimes school kids visited the McGraw Ranch on field trips. They asked about the harvests, the storms, and the old machines in the barn. And every now and then, one of them would point to the carved horse and ask, "Who was that for?" Tom would smile softly. "A friend," he'd say. "Someone who helped more than anyone will ever know." He never told the full story unless someone really wanted to hear it. And when he did, the kids always listened wide-eyed as he explained how a German POW, a man people once feared, had saved not just one ranch, but 2 entire states' harvests. They always asked the same question in the end. Why would he help us if we were his enemy? Tom would look out toward the golden fields glowing in the afternoon sun and answer simply, because sometimes the people we think are our enemies are just people who never had the chance to be our friends. History books never told Carl's story. No monuments were built for him, no statues, no newspaper articles. But his fingerprints lived in the wheat, in the barns, in the flow of the harvest that year. His quiet courage and steady hands had changed lives in a place he never planned to be. So the next time someone walked through those fields and saw the way the wheat bent in the wind, they might not know Carl's name, but the land remembered, and Tom remembered. And somewhere in Germany, Carl remembered too, and that is enough. What surprised you the most? That a POW helped save 2 states, or that he found a home in the heart of a cowboy? Tell us in the comments.